Welcome to a real-time strategy top 10 video. My name is Medic and today I am going to take you through my Total War Warhammer wishlist. This is my top 10 wanted factions in Total War Warhammer. Now, why am I making this list? Well, I'm a huge fan of both intellectual properties. I have been collecting and painting Warhammer for over 12 years now. I've always loved Warhammer Fantasy, the old world, which is where the game is set. I've read countless books on the backstory and lore of almost every faction in the tabletop game. I've collected Dwarves, Orcs and Goblins, Ogre Kingdoms, Vampire Counts, Chaos, and that's just recently. I've also been a massive Total War fan since Medieval 2. I have countless hours in each game. It's my go-to game series. So when this game was announced, it was like my two favourite gaming properties being mashed together. But at the moment I feel it's lacking some very important factions. With modern gaming, however, that is no longer a problem. DLC is the modern expansion packs, albeit usually smaller, with less content and much more expensive. No matter what your opinion on modern game developers and their business practices are, I'm sure you can agree that only 5 factions in Total War Warhammer at the time of making this video. We really need more. So what future factions would I like to see as DLC? They are as follows. Number 10. Kislev. Now, you may think this is off to a weird start. A decade ago, Games Workshop released a codex and a small miniature line for the Kislev faction. These included Bear Cavalry, Winged Lancers, Griffin Legion Cavalry, Warrior Priests, Kossars, and a rather large man on the back of a polar bear. Currently in Total War Warhammer, the Kislev faction looks exactly the same as any other Empire faction, when in reality they are completely different. Think of how different in style and look the Savage Orcs are compared to the normal Orcs. This is Kislev and Empire. They are interesting faction with enough varied units to fill a granted small roster. Also, the Empire and Kislev are not known to get along very much. The Empire think of them as more civilized barbarians, and of course, Kislev don't enjoy this comparison. As Vitalia Kovash, a winged lancer of Kislev, stated, "You look down on us, and we are little better than barbarians, but you should be glad we are, for without us here, the northern tribes would be dining on the flesh of your children in your burning homes. But for the courage that flows in our veins would your lands be theirs. Look down on us? You should get on your knees and thank us every day." This, I feel, would add a more interesting diplomacy interactions with the Empire. It would also be a chance to add another hard starting faction, as they are constantly, since their founding up until the modern end times era, under siege by the Chaos Barbarians to the north. All these reasons are why Kislev are my number 10. Number 9. Tomb Kings. Some of these factions you may wonder why are either higher or lower on my list than they would be on yours. That is because this is just my opinion. And in my opinion, I feel adding the Tomb Kings wouldn't add that much into the game which is not already there. We already have vampire counts to fill our undead needs, but the Tomb Kings are an incredibly interesting faction worthy of an inclusion. They are essentially undead ancient Egyptians. They have giant pyramids, sphinxes, bone giants, carrion vultures, pharaohs, scarab beetles, and even the Ark of the Casket of Souls. They have an incredible variety of units which would easily fill out a faction's worth of units. Their backstory and lore is interesting. The only reason this isn't higher on my list is because of their placement in the world. Being ancient dead mummies, they live in deserts. The desert, so far, in Total War Warhammer, is all the way down south, which is where it should be. That's where it is in the world. The issue is that the only faction near that, currently, is the Savage Orcs, then the normal Orcs, and the Southern Dwarf faction. Playing as the Tomb Kings in the Grand Campaign would get repetitive, I feel. You would always have to kill off the Savage Orcs before you got to more Orcs, before you got to a different faction. Unless you sail all the way to the Border Princes, I imagine this would get boring after a while. If, however, there was a big future DLC that expanded the map to accommodate this, then by all means, this is a great faction to add. You already have the skeleton models and animations. but at the world's current size, I feel this faction would be too limited in what it could achieve before you got bored. But this is where Nagash came from, so this is a yes please for me. Number 8. Chaos Dwarves. Now this one's going to be a really quick one on this list, and I'm not going to go into as much depth as any of the others. Mainly because Citadel haven't released a whole line of miniatures for this race. There's never been a codex from my understanding. There might have been in the early 80s and 90s, but they haven't really acknowledged this race as a real race in the fantasy world for a very long time. That might be different in Age of Sigmar, I don't know, but the Chaos Dwarves look amazing, and they go around riding giant bulls with wings, so yeah, they're in this list. Chaos Dwarves at number 8. Number 7. Daemons of Chaos. I have picked Daemons of Chaos purely because I would like to have more depth to the faction that has the potential to destroy the entire world. Personally, I feel that the current Warriors of Chaos faction are a bit lacking. Archaon the Everchosen is supposed to be the doom of the world. He is chosen by all 4 Chaos Gods, which is a big deal. But he currently gets outclassed by an old dwarf king on a golden chair. Their unit roster is huge, yes, but other than that I feel they are limited in what they can do. So the inclusion of the Daemons of Chaos would be a great one to vary up a bit. You could pick the Warriors of Chaos faction, then you could pick a favour. One of the 4 of the Chaos Gods, Nurgle, Slaanesh, Tzeentch or Khorne. Then pick a hero from that faction to start as. Each faction gets their own unique demons, heroes and units. Each also get giant scary demons like the Bloodthirsters for Khorne, Keeper of Secrets for Slaanesh, and the Great Unclean One for Nurgle. The only one of these greater demons currently in the game is the Lord of Change. You can already choose what god your lords and sorcerers favour, so why not the rest of your army? This would also open up the opportunity to fight other Chaos factions to prove which god is greatest and give a real reason to their infighting mechanic. They would unlock more and more abilities and items by proving to the others your god is the greatest. How? By killing them, which is exactly what the Warriors of Chaos constantly did. They were always infighting. It was the only thing stopping them from destroying the world, until Archaon united them all to fight under one banner. They could possibly have a favour bar, much like the Orcs' Wild Bar, and would increase as you killed and gained glory for your god. I would like to see this in the game, which is why it's my number 7. Number 6. And 5. High Elves and Dark Elves. Now these two are added together because I truly believe that if either of these factions were added, then the other should too. They are yin and yang. The High Elves are located on the island of Ulthuan, in the middle of the ocean. They are incredibly powerful with some of the best magic in the game, along with very strong infantry. Units ranging from dragons, phoenix riders, lion chariots, siege engines, eagle chariots, and did I say dragons? They also have the best navy in the old world. They regularly patrol the northern waste to make sure there is no chaos naval invasion to the southern lands, because the elves are bros. The Dark Elves are just as interesting in their roster. Hydras, Gorgons, dinosaur cavalry, and more dragons. They don't like the High Elves because they believe they deceived their way into power when it was rightfully the Dark Elves' right to rule, so they have been fighting ever since. The Dark Elves love slaves and killing, unlike their more morally pure brothers in Ulthuan. They also have a strong navy. They are the old world's pirate kings. They have Corsair ships with Corsair units occupying them. They even have a miniature with a peg leg. Pirate! If these factions are included into the game, then it will be the perfect opportunity to include naval battles, which is currently missing. It would also be a great expansion to the world. Adding Naggaroth to the map would open up the chance to add Lizardmen to the south of Naggaroth in Lustria. You could also link Naggaroth to the other side of the map, near to where the Greenskins are in the east. Amazing units, naval combat, and an increase in the size for the world map? Yes please. Number 4. The Lizardmen. As I just stated, the Lizardmen could be added if the Elves are. They occupy a region called Lustria, south of the Dark Elf lands of Nagaroth. The Lizardmen have an amazing roster, and the most powerful spellcaster known to the game. The Lizardmen not only have a strong roster filled with colourful lizard people and a T-Rex, but they also have a really interesting look and style. They are essentially Aztecs or Mayans. Their culture is borrowed from the art and weapons of the Mesoamerica era. Their buildings are situated in jungles. These include pyramids. They are violent, proud, and incredibly intelligent. The inclusion of this race would mean a whole new interesting region to play in. Jungles would be a nice change to the current environments. Possible disease and sickness mechanics could be added to the game to affect the enemy region's public order. Your army spreading their jungle diseases as they march through the lands. They are also the oldest race in the old world. They came before men, elves and dwarves. The Lizardmen are wise and ancient, and the old ones have foreseen events. They could have a prophecy mechanic, which would work similarly to the dwarves' grudges with a few changes. Instead of getting revenge on a faction that has already done you harm, the prophecy tells you of a faction that may do you harm in the future, and you need to prepare for that. There are also so many possibilities with the Lizardmen. But the real reason they are so high on this list is because they have dinosaurs. Really, must I say more? Their unit roster would be one of the most visually interesting and impressive. They would immediately become a fan favourite. Number 3. The Crooked Moon Tribe, or Night Goblins. Now this is a personal one. I love orcs and goblins. I've collected them in every iteration of Warhammer, be it orcs in 40k, orcs with a C in fantasy, or aurochs in Age of Sigmar. When I first played Total War Warhammer, I played as the orcs. After the first mission, you see a mountain to the south of you. What is this mountain? Carrick 8 Peaks, the home of a three-way war that has lasted decades, between the Dwarves of Beligor Ironhammer, the Skaven of Clan Moors led by Queek Headtaker, and by the most famous goblin of the old world, Skarsnik with his pet squig Gobbler. Skarsnik is the lord of the Crooked Moon Tribe and ruler of some of the 8 Peaks. I was surprised to not see him as a starting faction leader, as he is more famous, in my opinion, than Azag the Slaughterer, and has more written about him in the lore than any other orc leader. Night Goblins are already in the game, but are very limited by just having 2 units. If the Crooked Moon Tribe were added to the game, it would open up the possibility of having a goblin-only army. This is possible in the current game, but isn't terribly fun, as goblins have a tendency to run at the sight of a ladybug. The majority of the new units will be the most incredible creatures you have ever seen. Squigs! Short for squiggly beasts. Bizarre organisms that exist semi-symbiotically with orcs and goblins and orcs alike. Fungus-based animals. Their most iconic form resembles a large round ball that opens up a huge maw full of teeth, propelled by 2 strong legs that let it run, scramble, and jump all over the place. There would be squig herds, squig hoppers, night goblin war bosses on giant cave squigs as a mount option, squig gobbers, which shoot squigs like artillery, mangler squigs, colossal squigs, and of course, Skarsnik's own giant pet squig Gobbler. This would be a fun and interesting addition to the game, especially for any orc and goblin lovers out there. A new leader, new fun units, a new starting area? Yes please. Number 2. Ogre Kingdoms. Ogre Kingdoms are, well, a race of ogres. They are a race situated in the World's Edge Mountains. They are a tribal race with small nomadic towns more than cities. They worship the Great Maw, a giant hole in the ground which makes the ogres suffer from an insane hunger constantly. They hunted and killed all of the ancient giants that lived in the mountains and scrapped all of their weaponry. They are an incredibly interesting race, which of course are completely different from other races we currently have in the game. The ogres' constant hunger would have a mechanic like the orcs' war, needing to feast on their enemies' corpses to stop themselves giving in to the constant hunger, or they would start fighting each other. But there would be a huge gameplay change. There would be fewer ogres in a unit, so instead of a size of 80, they would only maybe have 20 in a unit. But this, of course, is balanced because they are ogres. They are stronger, harder to kill, and bigger than the average elf, dwarf, or man. They have a wide variety of units including Thunder Tusks, which are mammoth riders, Iron Guts, which are elite infantry, and they even have a cousin to the goblin race called Noblars. They have siege weaponry, cavalry, missile units consisting of ogres holding cannons as if they are bows. They will be a very fun race to play and watch in a fight. But the possibility that interests me the most is the inclusion of dogs of war with this faction. These are ogres who have travelled from all over the world looking for races to hire them for fights and to collect treasure. They range from pirate ogres, ninja ogres, Middle Eastern ogres, and even ogres who have visited the jungles of Lustria. An Ogre Kingdoms DLC could add the opportunity to hire dogs of war, much like there has been in other Total War games. Ogres are famous for being bought to fight for others. They have no alliances, so every race could now hire a unit of manhunters to fight for them. Ogres would be a fantastic addition to the game. They can be placed in the world as it is now, no need for expanding the map. They would also add the hiring mechanic, and there would be the most different faction gameplay wise added to the game. This is why they are so high up on my list. And who doesn't want to see a mammoth, saber-toothed tigers, or ogres riding rhinos? Number 1. The Skaven. Skaven are a must. If you are unfamiliar with the Skaven, they are ratmen that number in the hundreds of millions, probable billions, underneath the old world in what they call the Under Empire. They live in tunnels upon tunnels reaching all over the known world. They have underground cities, towns, workshops, breeding pits. They are integral to the eventual destruction of the old world. They are so important to the world's story that it would be a crime not to include them. They are the eternal enemy of the Dwarves. They are already referenced in the game by both the Dwarves and the Orcs and Goblins. The game even has a map which has a giant warpstone meteor crashed in the middle. Warpstone is what the Skaven use to create their siege engines, weapons, and what they eat to make themselves stronger, or dead in most cases. This is hopefully a hint as to what is coming. Skaven vary in size. Slaves number in the thousands on the battlefield and are used as literal cannon fodder. Real meat shields. Then are the clan rats, man-sized ratmen standing on 2 feet wielding rusty swords and battered shields. Last are the storm vermin, the largest and most violent of their kind, usually the elite units and bodyguards of their generals. Skaven worship the Great Horned Rat, a being so powerful he is eventually elevated to the 5th Chaos God. Their god becomes a Chaos God. This is huge! The Skaven would bring a very strong, fun and impressive army to the game. It would be the first that could target its own units on purpose. They have many different siege engines: Doom Wheels, Warp Lightning Cannons, Plague Catapults, Warp Fire Throwers, Doom Flayers, and Rattling Gunners. They have massive sniper-wielding ratmen. They have rats who throw poison globes at their enemies. They have rat ogres, created by literally stitching parts together in some Frankensteinian abomination. Speaking of abominations, they have the Hell Pit Abomination. This beastie is stupidly hard to kill. It has multiple heads, moves around with the help of a wheel, and regenerates like Wolverine. it's also possible to come back to life once dead. Imagine this in a game. You think you kill this awful looking monster on your right flank, and 10 minutes later it comes back to life. This has never been done in a Total War game before. It would be a great challenge. Skaven would also expand upon the Underway mechanics, as this is how they move around and where they live. The Underway could be a separate map consisting of different cities and strongholds for the Orcs and Goblins, Dwarves and Skaven. For these factions all fight for these tunnels and cities. The strongholds could also be the same. Imagine it. You are in Carrick 8 Peaks. There are no enemies on the surface, but when you switch to the underground map, you see the same city, but it is now besieged by Skaven. There could be multiple levels of defense in these dwarven strongholds. There would also be the first true Horde faction, units of uncountable numbers, which are incredibly weak and cowardly, but also devastating in numbers. Fast, but weak. They also have something called the Black Hunger, which could work like the Ogre Kingdom's hunger mechanic. Skaven need to feast on the dead or they die. You could buy Skaven slaves specifically to be eaten by other units in your army to stop them eating your more expensive units. Skaven have different clans, each with their own specialities. Some like building weapons, some like war, some like making abominations. You could pick your allegiances in the research tree, blocking off some units in order to gain others. You could then buy the units you have locked off from rival clans at a higher rate. This would be an interesting mechanic. Skaven also have assassins, some of the best. So good that one called Deathmaster Snitch actually managed to kill Thorgrim Grudgebearer in his own private quarters inside the largest dwarf city ever. So you already have special agents for the game. They also have wizards. Skaven are the perfect addition for Total War Warhammer. They have the most to give to this game in terms of story, gameplay changes and unit variation. I could go on and on, but these are my reasons why Skaven are my number one pick for what faction I want to see added into the game. So this is my list, but what would yours be? Please leave your comments below and share your top wanted factions. Please like, subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and please remember, this is just my opinion. Thank you all for watching.